Hello, family. It's been 24 years, 8 months, and 11 days since I said yes to leading with a passion. This is Benjamin Stewart, and you're listening to my podcast, Leading from the Edge. So this week I have to first give a shout out to my mother, who has always been the prayer warrior and the greatest fan of Neely and myself and our family, as well as my sister and her family too. Mom, I love you, and thank you for always pushing me, encouraging me, and being the go-between and seeing the best in us. Also, wouldn't it be a great Mother's Day without giving a wonderful shout out to my wife, the mother of my 9 kids. Yes, 9 kids. Neely, you are still the woman of my dreams, and I'm amazed at the wisdom and the care that you have for our kids. I love you dearly, and you are God's best for me. And speaking of being the best, that's what this podcast, Leading from the Edge, is all about. Not for the mere impact that you can have in leadership for you, but the ripple that carries into the lives of your family. That's the generational impact. And those that you lead directly, and that's mentorship, but also to those that get to see the results and they gain from knowing you, and that's legacy. It is greater than the feel-good of leading, and it's really about being able to climb to the top of the trees and give direction. So what does that look like in business or in church in this season? It means not growing weary in well-doing. It means not fainting in the day of adversity. But it also means that in seasons like this one, where the time has really slowed down for most of us, that we don't lose sight of the why we are leaders. You know, when everything gets stripped away and when the things that you found your identity in is removed, that's when you get to find out what kind of leader you really are. Where's your discipline? Where are your convictions? And that is where our why, we find out if it's strong enough, or maybe if we faint or get tired. And I'm not going to go too far into the whole faith conversation, but I've realized something in this season. Hebrews 11:1, it says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for. It's the evidence of things not seen." But faith is not the, quote, answer. It's the part of us that doesn't need the answer. I think faith is not a lack of storms. It's staring at fear in the face of a storm and still deciding to get sleep. And I think of, it's in Mark chapter 4, where the disciples are freaking out because water's coming into the boat. The storm is threatening them with death. And I can imagine all of them are standing on the deck, you know, bucketing out water, if that's a phrase. Bucketing out water. Yeah, if that's a phrase. And then one of them says, well, Peter will go talk to Jesus. Peter, go get Jesus. And Peter's like, where is he? And someone yells back, he's in the lower deck sleeping. And I can imagine Peter just runs in the room and wakes Jesus up. We need you. We need you. And we see this in Mark chapter 4, verse 38. It says, and Jesus was in the hinder part of the ship, asleep on a pillow. And they awoke him and said unto him, Master, care not that we perish? And I love what happens. He shows up to the top of the deck of the ship and he calms the storm. But his response to them spoke about their faith. And I don't think he was speaking about the faith to calm the storm. I think he was speaking about the faith to be able to sleep, because he looks at them and he says, O ye of little faith, how much longer do I need to be with you? It's what we do in the middle of the storm that is our expression of faith. I think that God already has enough faith. So in this week's topic of leadership, it's about not freaking out in the middle of the storm. It's about fighting that feeling of not being important or called anymore just because everything has changed around us. Or if you're wondering how you're going to reply to all of this with COVID-19, and if you're a church leader, what you're doing Now with church, now that it's different than what you've been doing before. If it's in business, it's how do I lead past the PPP and the finances that came in to help us with that. Now that that's moving on, how do I lead this team forward? Maybe you're just coasting and not taking advantage of this time, or maybe you're fighting that fine line between being a workaholic or just being driven, or that fine line between taking a rest or just being lazy. But in all those occasions, I found a winning combo in getting the rest and being driven, getting to get that rest you need, but also being driven without falling into laziness or becoming a workaholic. And I hope this tool I'm going to talk about saves you time, saves you some energy, maybe even exposes some blind spots, or prevents you from some significant failures, or maybe just missing God. So, number one, get on click. And yes, you heard that right. Get on click. See, I remember when I was leading a worship team and we had a slight disaster. Our 4-man team went down to 2. Probably a big disaster. I needed a bass guitarist and a keyboardist badly. Plus, I had this desire to bring some extra strength to our sets. And what I mean by extra strengths is I wanted to add some backtracks, some string movements. And when we really didn't want to go out and hire a string section from the local college. And that was what I really wanted to do. Plus, we lost 2 band members, and I knew there was a solution. So I sat down with our drummer, who just so happens to be the most beastly drummer I've ever been able to work with before. And now, to this day. Plus, his soul is so hungry for God. So I sat down with our drummer, and I told him, we need to get on click. And he looked at me, click? And see, so in music, there's this thing called a time signature. It's basically the amount of beats in a measure. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4. It's what keeps a song in timing. And you've probably seen this with a metronome on your grandma's piano that would swing back and forth, making that clicking sound, that click, 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 click. That's what we now call click. Kind of ingenious name, right? It's where we have this constant click, 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 click in the ear of our drummers on a main set. And actually, this is all over the world now. But it helps the band stay on track and on time. Otherwise, when you add these extra instruments, imagine them being literally 1 beat behind. It would be disastrous. So what was my drummer's response? He was like, click? Do you realize that's what that's going to do to me? I said, no, because I was thinking it was great. This is a great idea. He replied back, it's going to kill me. I'm just going to fall into these simple beats. I'm going to not feel creative anymore. I'm going to feel boxed into this beat, this thing just banging in my head. Click, 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 click. I'm going to feel restricted. And I said to him, can you do me a favor? Just take 2 weeks at doing this and then let's talk again. See, the first point with this whole process in leadership is get on click. Put a timing to your life that has a pattern to it. Like in weight loss, it's when you don't have to decide what you're going to eat next because you planned it out. You put yourself on click. You actually end up losing more weight. And what does it look like in life? Well, maybe it's a morning routine. What do you do every morning before you get into your day? Do you spend time with God? Do you wake up at the same time every day? Or do you just let your body decide when to get up? What's your click? Is there purpose first thing in the morning? See, I have this routine that when I'm on click, this is what I do. This is what I do. So at 5:45 a.m., I wake up, I drink a freezing cold glass of water, and I put an ice pack on the back of my neck. I literally do that. And then I sit down and I get in my word and I spend time with God. That alone time till about 6:15. And at 6:15, I make my breakfast, which every morning is the same thing. It's 1 cup of spinach, 2 egg whites, 1 whole egg, a half a can of black beans, a third a cup of mushrooms, and 4 ounces of meat. Yeah, I know. Sounds like a wonderful breakfast, right? You may think, that sounds delicious. Do that 6 out of 7 days a week. But I don't have to think about it. At 6:30 a.m., 6:30 a.m., I start making breakfast for my family. On Mondays, that's biscuits and eggs. On Tuesday, that's biscuits, hash browns, and eggs. On Wednesday, it's oatmeal. On Thursday, it's a breakfast pizza. On Friday, it is, what is Friday? Friday is cereal. I don't have to cook that day. And then Saturday, we typically either do pancakes, or we do English muffins, or we do something special, bagels, something unique on Saturdays. And then Sundays, we normally have already cooked some kind of a breakfast bread that we eat on Sunday mornings. But so at 6:30 a.m., I'll make a breakfast for the family. At 6:45, I'll listen to the Bible while I'm cooking that breakfast, while I'm making those eggs and stuff for my kids. 7:15 a.m., I read my goals. I typically pop into my office, which is just a cabin away, and I read my goals and my why out loud. Why do I do that? Because I know that faith cometh from hearing, and hearing from the word of God. But I know that that's a pattern of learning. And if I will read out loud what I know I need to be keeping at the center of my life, which are my goals and my why, which include God and my family, then I'm programming my brain as well. And at 7:40, I go back into the cafeteria, and all my kids are in there. They know what time breakfast starts. And all the kids sit at the table, and I go around and I lay hands on all of my children, and I speak a blessing over them. And by 7:45 a.m., I'm in my office working. So what are you doing to get on click? Point number 2, turn patterns into habits. Can we throw away the idea that consistent patterns or traditions in life mean that we're dead, that we have no life, or that we are just living in religion, or that we're stuck in our ways? I am so tired of hearing that, because for years, every time I'd find myself getting into a pattern, like I read my Bible this many days or this much time every day, I would have this nagging thought, or someone would say something, and I was so afraid of being defined by that pattern, I would change it, and I'd have to relearn something. Can I tell you what I've learned about behavior? If you do it consistently long enough, you end up doing that behavior without the internal battle. That's what we call a habit. And habits are good. John Rohn says motivation is what gets you started, but habits are what keep you going. Colin Powell says if you're going to achieve excellence in big things, you must develop the habit in little things. Because excellent is not an exception. It is a prevailing attitude. Or Stephen Covey, if you like his books, which if you are anything in leadership, I'm sure you've read at least one of his books. He says this: our character is basically a composite of our habits. Because they are consistent, they are often unconscious patterns. They constantly, daily express our character. See, instead of changing things just to change it, a leader that stands at the front will build great habits in their life. They will create great mentorships. They will create resets, mindset exercises. They'll invest in family consistently. They will surround themselves with accountability. Whatever it is they need to be consistent, they will make a habit of addressing it. What are you needing to make a pattern in your life in order to make it a habit? And what makes a pattern? I love what EOS says. This is a Gino Wickman thing. Same day, same time, same agenda, same length of time. And I can hear my free vibing friends freaking out at that. Trust me, this will make your creativity more powerful and more productive. This will make your life more productive. Think about it. Have a pattern that turns into habits. For marriage, spend time with your wife. Date nights, spend time with your husband. A date night. Families, Devotion time. A nightly devotion time. Doesn't have to be elaborate, but same time. Or in business, meetings that start and end on time. Same day, same time, same consistency. Health. Working out in a consistent pattern. Not just when you feel like going to gym, but just having those days that you go. Mental health. What's your daily investment in your mental health? Spiritual. What does your prayer time look like? Same every day. Are you in your word every day? See, the things that we fit into our schedule end up becoming the first things that we sacrifice when things happen to us. So instead of fitting this in your schedule, let your pattern become your habit. So, point number 1, get on click. Point number 2, turn patterns into habits. And point number 3, our last point, release the creative beast. Did you know that leaders need room to be creative? We will fill our lives with good stuff and we will fall apart from having a good creative room in our life. See, leaders need a dream. Leaders need to be able to see vision. So back to my story. 2 weeks later, my drummer came up to me with the biggest smile on his face. And he literally said, "Ben, don't ever take click away from me again. Never. I was wrong." Well, maybe he didn't say I was wrong, but I like to remember that. But this is what he shared with me. He told me that there was safety in click. He shared with me how he could explore, he can get funky, he could try out a different beat or a different pattern that he feels in the moment, knowing that it's okay because in 4 counts, no matter how good it was, how lost he gets, that pattern's coming back. He can get right back on click. In fact, he told me he found that he had more room in 4 counts in music than he ever thought he could have before because he knew he could reset every 4 counts. Even the biggest and worst mistakes, he'd be able to reset. So what does that mean for us as leaders? When we have a pattern in our life that we literally can unlock, we can literally unlock room in our brain to explore new things when we have that pattern in our life. Our battles are no longer what we should be doing, but what we could be doing because we have these patterns in our life. We've released the creative beast. We put ourselves on that click, right? We've turned patterns into habits. We can feel the freedom to explore ideas because we can get back to center. We can feel the freedom to dream more because we can get back to center. We can pray for the impossible because we can get back to center. We're not getting so far off in our faith because we have a pattern that has become a habit, a click to our life and our relationship with God. We can get creative in our leadership because we're exploring what God is speaking to us about our team, about us, about business, about how to respond to COVID-19 and to what the patterns are in the reopening of our organizations or our churches or our businesses. Tying all of this together as you pattern your life around your click, it becomes a pulse of centering back on God, back on principles, back on accountability. You will no longer be the disciple that's running to wake up Jesus out of fear. Because challenging whether or not God knows you or whether or not he cares, that's an old pattern. Instead, you have the confidence to sleep in the midst of fear and circumstances. So what are you going to do in this season? Let's get on click. Let's turn our patterns into habits. And let's release the creative beast. Okay, well, that wraps up another Leading from the Edge podcast. Leadership, in my opinion, means that every day you strive to be at least one step ahead, at least one experience in front of those that you have been given the gift of leading. It's not a matter of being the best or having this great badge. It's not even about being the brightest. It's simply about having the courage to lead. It takes commitment, persistence, sometimes a lot of patience. but it always takes an everyday God experience. I'm Benjamin Stewart, and until next time, go lead from the edge.